Okay, hi, welcome to the GC O-level series. This is a new series that I'm launching. It gives you a breakdown of past year exam questions from the 2272 as well as the 2236 syllabus. So for this series, I will be focusing on different areas. For today's video, we'll be looking at the open-ended question types. So I will have a running set of videos that focus on all the different open-ended question types that you will encounter in both the 2272 and 2236 paper. We will start with the 2019 paper. Uh, as you probably know, in this core job syllabus, for paper one, you will be dealing with only two topics, coast as well as tourism. We will be looking at coast and tourism open-ended question types that you would have encountered in the 2019 O-level GC O-level paper. So the first one is in section B, question two. Question two, part E, talks about a country will gain more economic advantages than economic disadvantages as a result of its growth in tourism. So to what extent do you consider this statement to be true? Now, when you take a closer look at the question itself, what they are looking for is for you to focus on economic advantages and economic disadvantages. They're not saying that you have to have one versus one, right? They are comparing, and you know that there are more than one economic advantage and one economic disadvantage when we covered this part of tourism. So it is up to you, it is actually up to you to pick whether you want to talk about two advantages, one disadvantage, or vice versa, right? So there are several factors to choose as I've written down here, economic disadvantage and advantage as well. You need to pick and have a three-factor comparison, right? I want to emphasize this. You have to have a three-factor comparison to have enough breadth of scope covered so that you will probably be considered for a full L3 answer. You must explore both the economic advantages and disadvantages because that is locked in the question itself, right? So if you don't explore both sides, you only choose to take one side, I'm very sorry, you're not answering the question. Okay, when you are talking about your factor points, it's very important to remember that your examples must be very comprehensive. Okay, so we've mentioned this several times in class before. Examples serve the function of clarifying your point. If you give me an example that doesn't help at all, then don't, right? You're better off not giving me the example, it's just showing me that you don't know what you're talking about. So please remember, examples are comprehensive. You have to give me a location, impact level of the example, and you have to make sure that the example actually relates to what you're trying to talk about in the question itself. Okay? And lastly, examples do not have to come from a textbook, but they should be something that can be verified by the marker. So don't come and tell me my sister's brother's boyfriend's sibling whose cousin tells me that there are 3 million tourists that visit Singapore a year and they contribute $10 billion. Right? That doesn't count as a credible source. Right? And I cannot check that. So what are some of the positive impacts that you can talk about economically? Of course, you can talk about job creation, right? You can bring in the multiplier effect, how job creation for one type of particular type of person will lead to a larger scale enhancement economically for the country itself. Job creation, also very interestingly, you can talk about direct and indirect types of jobs that benefit from tourism. Okay, so you have jobs that are directly in the tourism industry, like you, for example, you work in the hotel industry, or you can also talk about jobs that are not directly linked, but you have a fringe benefit. So, for example, if you're a taxi driver, a Grab driver, and because of the larger number of tourists in your country now, the customer pool that you're experiencing has consequentially increased. Okay, so you're benefiting indirectly from this, right? Disadvantages, there are two. Okay, two. I would rather you speak more about seasonal unemployment because it's a easier one to tackle. Seasonal unemployment, when you look at it in your textbook content, it talks about ski resorts in, I believe, Japan, either Japan or Korea, right? So you have to bring forth this idea that in the off season, these people are jobless. They're not like held within the resort itself to do other roles, to perform other kind of ancillary services. They're not. They're jobless. Okay, so they become unemployed. So that is a very big problem because within the peak season and the working season itself, they may not actually earn enough money to cover them throughout the entire year, right? The second thing we can talk about in terms of economic disadvantage is, of course, underuse of facilities in tourist areas. This will bring us back to certain event-based tourism, where you have like things like the Olympics, and where you have to build certain buildings or certain infrastructure specifically for the Olympics. Okay. The other one is, of course, the World Cup. These two major events where countries want to take part in tend to have to build infrastructure for them, and talk about how this infrastructure cannot be used effectively and efficiently after the event, and so a lot of the taxpayers' money that go into it actually go to waste. Okay, specific examples. So I repeat. So if you're talking about underuse of facilities, you have to talk about examples like the Beijing Olympics. Okay, what did they build? They built the Bird's Nest Stadium, which nobody can fill. Maybe BTS can, but short of BTS, I don't think anyone in this day and age can fill that stadium to full capacity. They use it for National Day though, the Chinese National Day as a part of the celebration. That's not really like a regular thing lah. You don't have many national days really. So that is useful to bring out the impact of the underuse, the scale of how underused it actually is. Right. So remember when you look at your assessment paragraph, you are focusing on the impact, okay, the scale of the impact that the advantages bring versus the disadvantages. So we can talk about it in terms of monetary loss, in terms of money spent, right? But it has to be a scale issue. Okay, so this is not exactly very tough to tackle. Most candidates should have picked this as opposed to the other one. Okay, sorry. The other OEQ question, open-ended question type in 2019 was on coast, okay, specifically on mangrove systems, right? 3E, rising sea levels are the greatest threat to mangrove systems. To what extent do you consider this statement to be true? Some point in your answer, you have to answer this, okay? Therefore, this statement, I agree that the statement is true. I believe the statement is true. I think the statement is untrue, right? So greatest keyword highlighted there. So greatest means three factors comparison. You must give me three factors, otherwise you are not fulfilling the command word greatest. Rising sea levels. Okay, there's your given factor. You have to describe rising sea level. Now, what if you don't know what causes rising sea level and you don't know how rising sea level is a threat to mangroves? Don't do this question. Okay, do the other one, do the tourism one, right? Be smart with this. Okay, don't fight a losing battle from the beginning, right? Provide detailed accounts of what causes rising sea level, what are the detrimental effects of rising sea levels onto the mangrove system itself, right? Increase in habitation, which basically means residential areas, and industrialization, right? Your industries, building of industries on the coast is one of the other threats to mangrove ecosystems that exist currently. Another one is aquaculture. Aquaculture with the case example in your textbook on Vietnam, right? And of course, there's also moving on. You can talk about removal of mangroves to make way for for fuel as a fuel source to harvest the mangroves as a fuel source to make charcoal. Okay, that actually happens a lot in the Philippines. So you do have examples for each of these things that you can talk about, right? When whichever one you pick to fight against rising sea level, you have to have awareness and understanding that rising sea level is something you cannot stop. Okay, think about that for a minute. You cannot stop rising sea levels. The sheer impact of rising sea levels is this. It's caused by climate change, right? And we have not shown the propensity to be able to stop climate change at all. So as of now, this is going to be definitely the largest and greatest threat to mangrove ecosystems because you cannot stop it. There's no amount of discussion, treaties that can be done or has been done so far to prove that we have the minuscule ability to work with one another to solve this problem. It is not a country level problem, this is a global problem. So having that in mind, scale of impact wise, no matter what are the other factors that you've chosen, maybe use of the coastal land for agriculture, residential industrialization, or use of mangroves as fuel, as a raw material for fuel, you are not going to be able to argue that that is more significant than rising sea levels. So this is one of the few cases where it's actually easy, if you know what you're talking about, right? This question is very easy to do, especially in the final assessment paragraph here. It's very easy to push the stand across to hit the L3 because there is a very, very strong factor, one that you can very easily prove that we cannot deal with, right? So that's 3E. So with this, we have covered the two open-ended question types for the 2019 core job paper 1. I will continue to make and upload more videos like this, covering this current syllabus, which will stretch all the way back to 2016. And I'm in the midst of tidying up the channel as well, so it becomes a little easier to search for certain content within the channel as well. Okay, so if you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. I have 600 plus 600 subscribers. Okay, one fine day we hit 1,000. It's not monetized. Hope this helps you in some way in your O level prep. All right, so thank you, and I will see you soon.